welcome everyone to another edition of Talking Team with Angela Poach and myself, Daniel Herman. And our guest today, we're excited to have Donna Fish from not too far from me up in New York City. And Donna is a level 4 Team CBT therapist and trainer, where, like I said, she's in New York City, consults, teaches, has a private practice, and was kind of notable for her book that she wrote, Take the Fight Out of Food. And she really taught workshops and done all kinds of work on specifically on eating disorders. And I know incorporating that somehow, we'll get to hear more about that and how that gets incorporated into Team CBT. So Donna, we're excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Donna.
Thank you.
So maybe we could dive right in. We don't have a lot of time. We have so much we want to probably ask you, but we always like to, I guess, kind of check in with people, especially people like you who've had such, distinguished careers and done so many different things. Like how you just, got, acquainted with and found out about Team CBT and got trained in it.
Yeah, well, it's so funny. I was just looking at what was the year that I did my first workshop with David, which was on, panic. And it was a workshop in New Jersey, in fact. And it was years ago. It was like Taylor hadn't even had her first child yet. That's why she had just come here from California, come back to New York. Anyhow, so I literally can't remember the date, but it was at least, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, roughly, maybe a bit more. And I was very excited by the material. I've trained in basically everything under the sun: CBT, family systems therapy, DBT, did my, all of my training in eating disorders, really trained in everything: psychodynamic theory, psychoanalytic theory. So I had a lot of experience. And what I was struck by with David's approach, I was really excited by the team approach, which I found to be very unique and different from all the approaches of therapy. And, specifically the agenda setting and, really working with the resistance so that you can work with, working with patients instead of, just waiting, having them come into this, at the beginning, everybody wants a change. And especially working with eating disorders, people say they really want to change. There's always really good reasons that they don't want the outcome, actually, the change, and especially don't want to do what it takes, right? The process resistance. So really figuring out how to work with that is what really, I think, sets TEAM apart from any other training in therapy, along with, of course, the testing, which was also very appealing to really get some granular, some data and some meat on the bones, the specificity. So there were a lot of things about it that excited me. And I ran into a colleague of mine. We had worked together in Mount Sinai Hospital back, years earlier. I really respected him, Bob Schachter. And he said, this stuff is fabulous. David is amazing. And I have so much respect for Bob. And he said, we're starting a training group with Taylor and myself, and here in New York, do you want to join it? And so I was like, yeah, sure. I'm always up for learning more. And so I continued with Taylor, and then I did more, training with Jill online, and continued with levels 2, 3, 4, and, continued to go. And I just did the Poland conference in the summer with a bunch of people. So that was a lot of fun.
So once you had that first experience, you were kind of all in and find ways to incorporate it into the work that you do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that the agenda setting with eating disorders, you were saying that's what really excited you. Tell us a little bit more about how you use Team CBT with eating disorders.
So it's a little bit tricky with eating disorders. I know that, you can look at the behavior as some of the, in a conceptualization of habits and addictions. At the same time, there's such a big mood component and it's really a solution to a mood problem. It's a lot of avoidance. That being said, there's so much more that you need to learn about eating disorders and the psychoeducation in terms of the impact physiologically on, because it's not just a psychiatric illness, it has medical kind of issues as well. So there's a lot that you have to sort of integrate. And so there's a lot of kind of preparation and I do a lot of paradoxing and agenda setting, because you know, the behaviors are so entrenched, the habits are so powerful. And unlike you know, an addiction to alcohol or drugs where you could be abstinent, you can't be abstinent with food. And in
Right.
fact, the usual models of abstinence of like, oh, just don't eat, you know, these foods, you know, that you have no control over, you think you have no control over, it actually reinforces the deprivation mindset and the belief that, you know, the person shouldn't be eating. So it's a little trickier to navigate, and you have to be careful about not using sort of a full-throated, you know, addiction sort of approach or habit approach. And you have to really look at that it's really the belief in the need to deprive oneself. That's the sort of fix the belief, and figuring out how to modulate that and how to sort of soften that. And there's so many good reasons, you know, and there's many layers and levels to an eating disorder. So obviously the first stage is helping people begin to integrate food and be able to eat in a way where it helps their brain get back online. Because when people are binging and purging a lot, or compensating with over-exercising or restricting food, even certain types of food, it really does affect, dysregulates their mood, and it also affects cognitive ability. So you can't just come at it with a straightforward sort of cognitive approach, and really helping a person start to eat kind of in a way that feeds their brain and gets it back online is really the first step. And so you know, there's a good use of paradoxing, and I have to get a team involved, get a medical professional in place to make sure that they are, you know, in good medical state, so that I'm not also dealing with medical problems.
Yeah, that makes sense that you'd want to address the medical side of it and make sure they have a good team involved, because there does sound to be like a lot of layers, very multifaceted issue. You've mentioned paradoxing quite a bit, and Daniel and I know what that is. Explain a little bit of what you mean by paradoxing. You have a very paradoxing approach.
Well, I mean, one of the things, you know, especially when somebody first comes to me, for example, I had a 13, she was 16, come to me, and she was, you know, had really dropped weight. She was quite, you know, anorexic. And when she first came to me, and she had seen somebody else, and you know, the parents were very concerned, her doctor was concerned, I first really looked at all of the reasons, that all of the sort of how it was helping her, really the advantages of the behavior. And we got very specific about when she was restricting and controlling her food and not eating, and how it made her feel, and how good it made her feel, and all of the good reasons, like all of the advantages of the behavior on all of the different levels, and how it was really solving a certain problem. And so and that was pretty unique. You know, she was used to therapists coming in and saying, oh, you've got to change, you've got to gain weight, you've got to gain weight. And so I really, you know, just looked at first, let's wait. You know, you're not doing this to hurt yourself, actually. You're doing this because there's something that's helping you. There's something in this, and let's pull it out. And oftentimes people aren't even aware of, oh, this is really helping me in this way. And that sort of moved things a little bit, to the degree at which she was willing to do some incremental sort of exposures to beginning to eat more incrementally. So, you know, sort of systematic desensitization. You know, we were you know, doing smaller exposures, not huge, because you can't, you know. So I meet the person where they're at, also what they're able and willing to tolerate. There was a lot of family, you know, a lot of family stuff, a lot of interpersonal stuff going on. So obviously empathy is really key. But using, you know, really looking at the positive reframe has been unbelievably powerful for people.
So I'm sure we get so much else we want to get to, but I had a follow-up question, Don, if it's okay. And I don't know if you could even answer this in the short time that we have, but you know, my family, you know, suffered from anorexia, and the treatment that they used was family-based treatment. So I'm curious, like with that idea of like the idea that basically you need to renourish the brain before they can make any healthy choices that make sense. How would that work with Team CBT, right? Where we're presuming, right, that we could issue an invitation and be paradoxical, eventually do all kinds of cognitive tools. How would that, would that in your mind kind of be able to work hand in hand with FBT, or it would be like different approaches?
Well, again, with FBT, first of all, I do FBT, but it's with younger kids. So if it's an adolescent, they don't want to be doing, I'll work with parents on some coaching, because you want to sort of work hand in hand to see, okay, what's the adolescent going to be able to tolerate without completely rejecting the help. And usually they don't want the over involvement. So again, there's a lot of family system stuff going on, but in terms of, I do coaching with the parents to help them. It's a little psychoed. I'm not going to be, I might be challenging some of their beliefs about their own fear of, our job is to protect our child from their own anxiety, which makes it hard for them to do exposures, right? If it's a younger child. Mm-hmm. And I've done work with kids with RFIC, and oftentimes you have to do exposures with the parents, because they're so scared and sort of powerless and helpless. They're so scared. My kid's going to throw up, or my kid's going to be so uncomfortable. And so I have to help the parent not be so frightened of their child suffering, and I always kind of do a lot of coaching around it's a feeling, not a fact. This is emotional reasoning. So I'll use some cognitive strategies to help them kind of take the, sort of dial down the intensity of their own fear. And so there's that piece of it, while, I might be doing another intervention with the kid, or also empowering the parents to kind of work hand in hand. So that's if you're working with the whole system. If it's an adolescent, sometimes the parents are in their own couples therapy adjunctively. So again, I like to treat every case individually. Every case is going to be different. I don't say, oh, it's just this. I've had people refer to me where it was recommended FBT and it was totally backfired because the parents were not able to do that. And, so I like to sort of take a case, take a very big wide lens to it and see, okay, there's a lot of aspects. I take an ecosystem sort of perspective with my training from the social work degree, and look at all of the different things that are going on, and then say, okay, here's where we're going to need to intervene here, here, and here. So it's not just a cognitive approach. It's going to be tools and methods from all of that's where the M part, you're going to have to figure out, wait, it's going to make more sense to do this method and working with the family system here, or a cognitive strategy here at this moment in time. So there's a lot going on at once.
Yeah. And maybe, how it all works together. Maybe you can even illustrate it. I don't know if you have some example of how whether it's one of your adolescents or someone else you work with who you've kind of show us how TEAM has kind of impacted your practice, like some specific example, how you've woven it into everything else that you do.
So again, TEAM is the methods from all of the schools of therapy, right? So obviously I do testing. So thinking of a patient, an adult patient that was referred to me with a history of bulimia, and she was actually still actively bulimic. And so obviously I would do testing with her, working on, first she wanted to work on her mood. And she was highly anxious, very, some depression, but, high on the anxiety scales. And she had some eating disorder behaviors. We just sort of outlined them. She was not ready to make a shift in any of those, which was fine. She wasn't in medical danger. She was seeing a doctor. That was covered. So we worked on this specificity, right? Lots of empathy, did the testing, a lot of empathy. And when she was ready, she really figured that, we did the invitation step, specificity. It was like, you're describing that you're binging a lot. At times you purge with exercise and then some restriction the next day. At the same time, you're also very, very anxious. You're worried about this and this and this. All these different issues. Which one? I offered again. Asking her specificity. Which of these would you want help with first? And she identified that as the mood issue, her anxiety. And I asked the miracle cure question of, and then if, you got just what you wanted and we had a magic wand and therapy was really successful, what would change? And I get very granular when I ask that question. I get very specific because people sometimes are confused with that and they are like, wait, nobody's ever asked me that. I ask it at the beginning when they come in for a consultation, but even as we're getting into the work and getting into the specificity, then I'll ask it again because it gives you a lot of information about what. So she was saying, I don't want to feel as anxious when I look in the mirror. I have terrible body image. She had a lot of body image, some dysphoria, but she was very, very, anxious about her body. She really didn't want it to interfere with her eating. She wanted to work on that first. And she was able to identify what I would like to not feel as distressed when I look at myself in the mirror. So we got very concrete about that. And as we got into the specificity, we did the moment in time. I explained all of that reasoning to that. We worked very actively with lots of methods, exposure methods. We did mirror. I mean, there's a mirror exposure method that can be quite effective with some body dysmorphia. At the same time, just working on some cognitive methods, some exposure methods. Her anxiety levels did go down through measurements. And then she was ready actually to go into some of the behaviors and some of the habits. And the thing that's different than I think it's counterintuitive and everyone thinks that is always shocked when I'll say this, but if anybody is ever binging, in order for them to stop binging and purging, or certainly binging, they need to be willing to actually look at the next day how they're compensating by restricting. And even if they're not behaving with restrictive behaviors, their cognitions are saying, I need to restrict. I ate so much last night. I blew my diet. I better not eat tomorrow. And that's actually, and I help them to see the link between the cognitions of I ate, I better not eat tomorrow and I'll restart my diet tomorrow, or I won't have that tomorrow, which actually feeds the binge. And it actually accelerates their binging in the moment because they're sort of letting themselves off the hook. And that's why they keep eating and eating and eating, because they're going to start their diet. So rather than trying to target the binging and the cognition, we target the cognitions that actually fuel the binge.
The fuel binge. Yeah, this is so fascinating. We could probably talk to you for hours about this.
This
we so much more time.
This is a classic paradigm of what happens to people with just dieting, on and off dieting.
Yeah.
And so if it's sort of not as extreme as like full, that's why I like to treat disordered eating too.
It plays into disordered eating, not necessarily an eating disorder.
Yeah. And it's often, I mean, in my book, I quote a research study where just the thought of depriving oneself creates binging. Just even the thought, I shouldn't eat this and I won't eat. So as opposed to like the sort of model of like, well, you need to control and not eat, French fries or eat, this or that. I have cured people by exposures where in fact, I have them eat the very food they think they can have control over it within less than 2 weeks, they're cured. And then we can generalize it into other foods. But so there's a lot of different methods, but it's really, the model and the methods is I use methods. I do EMDR with, a lot of people with eating disorders have trauma. I pull out methods from every kind of everything, and I'm very creative. And so when you get to the M part, you can, use all of your training.
The world's your oyster, so to speak. There's so many methods. You had said that there's this individual approach that you have to look at the big picture first, which is very much a team philosophy that we treat people, not disorders.
Right.
And so I think that really does align with it, even though we pull in all kinds of methods from everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I wish we had more time with you. I wanted to hear more about, some of how you deal with these kind of cognitions. So we'll have to.
We'll bring Donna back. I mean,
We're
why
going to
not?
have to bring Donna back. Yeah, but let's end with our last question we ask everyone. And that is, if all the therapists in the world were listening, Donna, what's one thing about TEAM you'd like them to know?
One thing that it's an approach to treatment that makes the most sense of anything you've ever learned. That's all I can say. And it works. And patients, you will expand your practices and you will have waiting lists, and you will really, really be incredibly effective and have very, very positive relationships with your patients.
Oh,
You will
you go.
really enrich your practice and be very happy.
Angela, you just got your clickbait to put on the YouTube video
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah, you'll have wait lists. I love it. There's lots to pick from. Thank you so much for coming, Donna, and thank you to our viewers for watching.
My pleasure.
Everyone.
Bye.